and a very warm welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to tell you all about the stock market. By the end of this video, I hope you will be able to answer the following questions. What is stock? Question 2. How are prices determined on a stock market? Question 3. What happens when you buy a stock? Question 4. How does a stock index track the stock market? And also, I hope you will be able to explain the jargon that they use in the stock market. Now, I'm sure you've heard of investing in stocks. You have heard people talking about investing in stocks and the fact that it can actually be a really great way to create wealth over time. And that is certainly true. So how do stock markets actually work? But before we get into how they work, I think it's important that we understand stocks and how they work on a basic level. So what is stock? Stocks, also known as equities or publicly traded companies, represent ownership interest in businesses that choose to have their shares available to public investors. A share of stock represents an ownership interest in a company. In other words, you buy a share of the company. You own a small part of the business and you get to share in the company's success. In other words, instead of being owned by an individual or a private group, some companies choose to go public, meaning that anyone can become a part owner by purchasing shares of the company's stock. So when you buy a share of stock, it means that you buy ownership. You buy a share of that particular company. You own a small part of the business. And for that reason, then, you get to share in the company's success. So stocks are equities or public traded companies and they represent ownership interest in businesses that choose to have their shares available in public to public investors. Now that you know what stock actually means, which is basically a share, okay, meaning that you become a part owner of that particular company when you buy a share. Let's now get into stock market basics. So how does the stock market actually work? Stock markets facilitate the sale and the purchase of the stocks between individual investors, institutional investors, and companies. The vast majority of stock trades take place between investors. And that means, for example, if you want to buy shares of Microsoft and hit the buy button through your broker's website, you're essentially buying shares that another investor has decided to sell and not directly from Microsoft itself. And how are prices determined on a stock market? Now, prices within the stock market are governed by supply and demand. At any given time, there is a maximum price someone else is willing to pay for a certain stock and a minimum price someone else is willing to sell shares of the stock for. Now, think of stock market trading like an auction, with some investors bidding for the stocks that the other investors are willing to sell. And if there is a lot of demand for a stock, investors will buy shares quicker than sellers want to get rid of them, and the price will move higher. On the other hand, if more investors are selling a stock than buying, the market price will drop. Now take it a step further. It is important to consider how it's possible to always buy or sell a stock you own. And that's where market makers actually come in. Market makers ensure that there are always buyers and sellers. To ensure that there is always a marketplace for stocks on an exchange and investors can choose to buy and sell shares immediately whenever they want to during market hours, individuals known as market makers act as intermediaries, the link between buyers and sellers. Now, I'm going to give you a little rundown of what investors should know about the process. Market makers buy and hold shares and continually list, buy and sell quotations for shares. And the highest offer to buy shares listed from a market maker at any given time is known as the bid. And the lowest offered selling price is known as the ask. The difference between the two is called the spread. The main reason for using the market maker system as opposed to simply letting investors buy and sell shares directly to one another is to ensure that there is always a buyer to match with every seller and vice versa. Now, if you want to sell a stock, you don't need to wait until a buyer wants your exact number of shares. A market maker will buy them right away. So what happens when you buy a stock? Now, investors must carry out the transactions of buying or selling stocks through a broker, which is simply an entity that is licensed to trade stocks on an exchange. A broker may be an actual person who you tell what you buy and sell, or more commonly, this can be an online broker. Say, for example, TD, Ameritrade, or Fidelity, just to name a few. And an online broker then processes the entire transaction electronically. Now, when you buy a stock, this is what actually happens. You tell your broker or input that electronically what stock you want to buy and how many shares you want. Then your broker relays your order to the exchange and a market maker sells you shares at the current market price. And then the shares are then delivered to your account. So how does a stock index track the stock market? Now, you've probably heard statements such as the market is up or that a stock beat the market. Now, often when discussing the stock market, people generalize the market to a stock index. Now, stock indexes such as the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones Industrial Average are a representation of the performance of a large group of stocks, but often not an entire stock exchange, and are used as a benchmark to compare the performance of individual stocks or an entire portfolio. For example, the S&P 500 index tracks the performance of 500 of the largest publicly traded companies in the United States. Indexes are a convenient way to discuss an approximation of what is happening in the market, but it's important to understand that the major stock indexes you see on television and in the news do not fully represent the entire stock market. Now, finally, I'm going to explain to you some of the jargon that they use in the stock market world. Now, there are three different terms that tend to be very commonly used in the stock market. Now, first of all, let me begin by explaining a stock market. What is that? A stock market refers to the process of investors buying and selling stocks with one another. A stock exchange is the actual intermediary that connects buyers with sellers, such as NYSE. And a stock index, as we have just looked at, is a numerical representation of a group of stocks that is used to track the collective performance. So a stock market refers to the process of investors buying and selling stocks with one another. And then a stock exchange is the actual intermediary that connects buyers with sellers, such as the NYSE. And then a stock index is a numerical representation of a group of stocks that is used to track their collective performance. Now, I hope you have a better understanding of the stock market. I hope I have tried to clarify some of the questions that you may have had, for example, in regards to how the stock market actually works. I hope you now understand what stock actually is. Remember, we said that it is simply a share of the stock which represents ownership interest in a company. And if you buy a share, you own a small part of the business and get to share in the company's success. I also hope that you now have a better understanding of how prices are determined on a stock market. And I hope I've also clarified what happens when you buy a stock. And finally, I hope you have good insight into what the jargon that is used in the stock market does actually mean. Now, if you found this video helpful at all, if the video has actually opened your eyes a little bit in regards to what the stock market is all about, then kindly give this video a thumbs up. Share the video with anybody else who may benefit from it, and subscribe to this channel for more useful content. Because remember, if it has anything to do with money, I upload it, because my goal is to help you to improve your financial status and grow your wealth. Now, thank you, and I shall see you in our next video. Bye bye and take care.